Welcome to another episode of the Tiger 700 project. All my molds are now finished and I'm ready to start building my final panels. As I'm building this body, I've got a set of priorities of what I want to get accomplished here, but sometimes it's important to have to prioritize your priorities. So these are what my priorities are. First off, this body needs to be strong. I don't want it to, to crack on me or have any sort of strength problems. I don't want it waffling in the wind as I go down the road. So I do want it to be strong, and that is priority number one. Then the next priority right after that would be lightness. Again, my whole car, I want it to come in under 600 pounds. So that includes the body. I've got a good start on the rest of it, so I want the body to be light as well. So that is why I'm considering some other materials like S-glass and carbon fiber to try to achieve that lightness. The next priority after that is cost. It is a home project. I don't mind spending a little extra to meet my first two priorities, but do want to keep it reasonable. I don't want to spend any more than I have to. And then the last priority of all is my time. My time is worth something. I want to do something really crazy that takes me months to do. Hopefully something only takes days or weeks to do. So that's my fourth priority. So first priority is strength, then keep it light, then keep it under budget, and then my time. The question is what material I will use and how many layers of it I'm going to use. So I'm looking through the materials I have, and the ones I have experience with. Certainly, most everyone has experience out there with chopped strand mat. A lot of people use it. I think they overuse it personally. And this would do it. I've seen where people have done a body, say, in 2 layers of 1.5 ounce chopped strand mat and it held together. It seemed to be strong enough. But chopped strand mat absorbs an awful lot of resin, and ultimately it's sort of a heavy choice. So I've eliminated that one. There's also Biaxial. Like the 1708 is commonly used. Maybe even 1 layer of this would work. But again, it absorbs an awful lot of resin. Basically it's chopped strand mat on the back practically. It's sewn together, but it's kind of the same thing. It's another heavy choice. So then you get to cloth, and I've got some 6 ounce, just simple cloth, just 1/1 type cloth, fiberglass cloth, and this works well as lighter than those other two, but it would take a number of layers to really make it strong enough. So these are all materials I've got experience with in the past. Thought I might try something new on this project. I've got 2 new materials here. This may look the same, but actually instead of just regular fiberglass, this is what's called S-glass. S for, I think it stands for structural. It is significantly stronger than normal fiberglass. So I want to try this. And one of the things I really want to test here is not only the strength that it has, but also its drapeability. Is it going to conform to the shape of my body here, which is very shapely, you might say. So that's one material I'd like to try. The other one that everyone talks about, ours, we talk about strength to weight ratio, is carbon fiber. So I bought a couple yards of this just to experiment with, to kind of finalize what my layup schedule will be. There. So, on these areas where I know the carbon fiber doesn't have the drapeability to really cling to that surface, I'm going to start off here on this first trial with S-glass, but on a 45 degree angle to help it drape over that curve. And here is a better look at my sample area that I've laid out on my panel. You can see I've taped it off, and I got plastic around the edges here. I don't know if you can see that on the video. So it's all protected, so the only part that's exposed on this panel is just this area that's taped off. I've already waxed this area with parting wax. did not polish. And I have also put a coat of PVA on it. You might see the PVA is a little uneven. I had this laying flat when I was doing it and it puddled a little bit. I did kind of dab it out to get most of it out. But to be honest, on this sample, I am not that worried of the way the surface looks. I just want to make sure it releases. So let me kind of quickly walk you through the layup that I'm going to do on this first sample. Now, from the previous video, you saw that the carbon fiber did not really drape very well over this area here. It's just a little bit too sharp for it. So I cut the S glass. I'm going to put S glass in this area, but I cut it on a diagonal, 45 degree. So actually, the way this runs, you can't see on the camera, but the threads are running this way because I cut it on a diagonal, and that helps it drape a bit. So the first one goes right there, and that's where the S glass is going to go. Then I'm going to do a layer of carbon fiber right down inside there, and another layer of carbon fiber on this side as well. Okay. All right, and that'll lay in there just like that. And then I'm going to do another layer of the S glass, again cut on a diagonal. This one, if you might notice, is a little wider. And that is so once I lay this out, that the ridge of the previous S glass doesn't lay right on top of the other. So it sort of steps down. Okay? Then another layer, then the second layer of carbon fiber goes on. Like this. And then finally, one layer of S glass, and that sort of locks it all together. And particularly since S glass isn't quite as strong as the carbon fiber, I figure 3 layers here where it kind of encapsulates it versus the 2 layers of carbon fiber should be a good balance. So that's the layout. Let's get started. Test sample number 1 is now cured. It's hardened as much as it's going to get hard. And here it is. It came off very easily when I did pull it off. And that's actually pretty stiff, particularly where it comes in, it overlaps with a carbon fiber. But essentially that's 5 layers. And I could just about live with that. Just about. But the rest of this is really flexible. I mean, like, really flexible. Kind of like an 18-gauge steel almost. I expect it to be a little harder, but it's not. It is what it is. So I intentionally started light. I would have been surprised if my first sample would have been heavy enough. Because my strategy here is start light and then build up to the layers, the bare minimum layers you think you're going to need to build the body. So I do want to keep that body as light as possible. So I am going to call sample number 1 a partial success. I am going to take this sample one step further because I didn't put gel coat on it. I do plan on putting gel coat on the final body, and I'm going to see if that makes it feel any stronger. So let's move on to sample number 2 and the layup I'm going to do for that. I am going to start again with a layer of carbon fiber and lay that down. Now I've already proven how I'm going to handle this edge, the sharp edge, so I'm not going to wrap the whole thing this time. What I'm trying to do is get strength in this panel. Start with that same 6-ounce carbon fiber, and by the way, that's a 2/2 twill. They call it a satin. I'm not sure I would call it a satin, but it's a 2/2 twill. And I'm going to try a core material. I bought some Biaxial. It's a vinyl core material. It is 1/8 inch, and I am going to do a sandwich this time. So, layer of carbon fiber, 1/8 inch of vinyl foam, another layer of carbon fiber, and we're going to keep it that simple, and we're going to see how that works out. In order for this 1/8 inch foam to really work well as a core, and by the way, it is a 3-pound foam vinyl that I'm using, 1/8 inch. You really want to make sure you get a tight laminate between the layers. In order to do that, first off, you need to conform the shape to whatever you're molding. So what I've done is, you can see there is a curve to this, which I have put into it. And the way you do that is just by applying heat and bending it. It's really not that hard, but it is an essential step to take so it lays nice and flat and it doesn't pop up on you. Simply use a heat gun. The other thing you need to do to make sure this core really works right for you is you want to make sure that it laminates really tightly around the edges. So to ensure that the top layer will connect really tightly with the bottom layer of carbon fiber, you want to, I don't know if you can see this on the video, but you want to sand down the one edge. It's just a matter of taking some sandpaper, a sandpaper block, and just sanding it down. And what that makes sure is that when that top layer comes down, that it has a nice slope to follow and to meet the next piece of carbon fiber that's underneath. Doing those two things will ensure that this will be a stronger laminate. Okay, I got the layup done now for both experiments I was doing here. The one I was calling experiment number 2 is together. It has, this is 2 layers of carbon fiber with some 1/8 inch foam in between. And before I start here, I gotta say this was a lousy layup. So it does null the results somewhat. A couple of things happened while I was trying to get this done. Mainly it was a problem with the foam, is what really caused the problem. As you remember, I had using heat, I had bent it to match the contour of my panel here, and it was really close. I would say it was within about 1/8 of an inch of being where it was supposed to be. But once I did the layup, it tended to lift just a little bit at the edges, and because every time I rolled it, it would go down and back up, down and back up. So I didn't get a really tight laminate here. And one of the things I did try was I said, okay, I'll just wait for the resin to get tacky, and then I'll use my roller and I'll roll it down, and that foam will stick and we'll all be good. Well, once I did, as soon as I touched it, I don't know if you can see this, it lifted. It was tacky on the top too, so that the carbon fiber was lifted away. So basically, that's one nasty there. And also, what I also found is on the back side, this is the side that was to the mold, that once I laid the foam on there and the foam started tipping up a little bit, what would happen is it actually lifted the carbon fiber off the mold. So there's a little ridge here where this thing lifted up because of that foam. So there are a couple of problems with this. I call them lessons learned. But there's also another lesson learned in terms of strength. This is much stronger. Even as bad as this laminate is, it is still much stronger. I'm putting quite a bit of force into it there. It has a lot more strength than without the foam. So here's the lessons learned, and here's how I'm going to go forward with this. First off, I'm not going to do a whole panel of the foam. I'm going to do ribs for one of my next experiments and see how that works, along with a little bit more, a couple more layers on here. One of the problems is I only have one layer here and one layer there, and that's really not a laminate. One layer of anything is not going to work very well, so you need a couple of layers. So I'm going to try putting another couple of layers on it. The other big lesson here was, of course, to try to roll it with this tacky. That just didn't work. But there's another kind of vinyl foam out there made by the same company, Biaxial. It's the same foam, same weight, except it's scored about every 1/2 inch. And there's a shear material glued onto it. And what that does is that allows it to conform just naturally to what you're doing. There's all these little sections that go in. And I think for my final, laminate, that's what I'd like to do. I'd have to get some of that on order. Okay, so on the next experiment, this is basically about all I can do with this one. Like I say, it's a bad laminate, and I'm just going to toss it. It's not worth trying to do anything else to it. Okay, and then what else? This is what I was calling 1B, the first experiment. This is the one that had, again, 2 layers of carbon fiber with the S glass along the curve here, and I was going to put some gel coat on it. So here's the gel coat. It's pretty sloppy job, but that wasn't the point here. It was to see if it gave it any more strength. So I can tell you it is a little stronger. It's got a little bit more sturdiness to it. Not a lot, not enough. But something to consider on the total laminate, because I was planning on using gel coat. So I am going to take this one step further. One of the things that's promised why it's so flexible is because it's like a piece of just flat sheet metal. You're going to put some shape in it or something to hold the edges, because if you hold it shaped like this, then suddenly it gets strong. Okay, it's pretty strong. So the ribs I just mentioned, I'm going to put the ribs on here with 2 more layers of S-glass and see what happens then. So that's an extension for this one. We'll call that test 1C. Okay, and then the one thing that we haven't done here, as long as we're doing experiments and I've got the mold laid out, is we know how stiff carbon fiber is. 2 layers of 6-ounce carbon fiber, basically a total of 12 ounces of carbon fiber. What if we did the same thing with S-glass? Just molded it up with the same profile, and let's see how strong that is by comparison. So here's the results of the last 2 layups here with S-glass and just regular old fiberglass. Here's the S-glass with a big S on it, and it is pretty flexible. And I would say it is certainly more flexible than the carbon fiber, as I would have expected. Okay, so it is more flexible. And that's all I got to say about that. Let's look at normal fiberglass. And again, this was 2 layers of 6-ounce S-glass, total of 12 ounces. Similarly, this is a total of 12 ounces of just regular fiberglass, and it is about the same flexibility, a little bit more flexible. Really, I was a little disappointed that there really wasn't more difference between regular fiberglass and S-glass. And considering the price for S-glass, I would say I have ruled this out now, just because it's not that better than regular fiberglass and it's a lot more expensive. I'll probably end up using fiberglass and carbon fiber. So after all this testing, I started thinking about why is this so flexible? My results are so flexible. And it sort of came to me, I've done all these tests with polyurethane resin instead of epoxy resin. Epoxy resin is stronger, it's a little stiffer. So I said, okay, I've done all these tests now. Let's try something new. Let's just do the full layup with the carbon fiber, the best setup I've had so far. But this time let's do it with epoxy resin. And here's the result. Here's just the first layer. It has gel coat on it, and then just the 2 layers of 6-ounce carbon fiber. And I gotta tell you, there is a dramatic difference as far as how hard this is. It's still a little flexible, as you can see, but once I get done putting ribs on this, that should take care of that. But this has convinced me that I need, for this body, I am going to move away from polyester and go for epoxy. So here are the ribs. If you take a close look, you can see I've scored them about every inch or so. The ribs themselves are about 1.5 inches wide. So by scoring them, this is just like that material I was telling you about that comes pre-scored. So when you turn this over, without any bending whatsoever, it more or less follows the contour. I'm poking up a little here, but there's like no resistance. Once I get the the fabric on there, that should lay right down. So here's the sample with epoxy resin versus polyester resin. You can see I've laid it up the same way as the one I did before. This is the one I did in polyester. Ribs are more or less the same. They are a little thicker. I went with 1/4 inch versus 1/8 inch on this, but more or less the same size sample as far as this section goes. And I can tell you that this is significantly stronger. primarily just because I used epoxy versus the polyester. Let me just demonstrate that for you. First off, you can tell just when you hit this thing, I mean, it is hard. It is really hard. And then when you put a weight on it, you can see the polyester. I've got a 30-pound weight here just to demonstrate. You put this on the polyester panel, and you can see it more or less puts it flat. Take that same weight, more or less the same materials in it, but epoxy, and put it on this panel, and you can see it barely deflects. So, much stiffer panel. I'm definitely going with epoxy. So this is the layup schedule I'm going to use. It is definitely strong. That meets my first criteria. It is slightly heavier than I would have really liked. I was hoping to do the entire body for about 30 pounds. If my calculations are right on this, I'm going to be closer to 40, maybe 45. So I do want to weight reduce this just slightly. One way I'm going to do that is to not put the gel coat on quite so thick. I really slathered on 2 really thick layers on here. So that's one easy way to reduce the overall weight. And the other one is I've got basically 12 ounces of fiberglass material here, just plain fiberglass, not the structured fiberglass. And instead of going with like 2 layers of 6-ounce fiberglass, I'm going to go with 2 layers of 4-ounce fiberglass. So that'll give me a total thickness of 20 ounces all total, when you include the carbon fiber and fiberglass, versus 24 that I have here. Basically, I've got 4 layers of 6 ounce. 2 of those layers are carbon fiber, and 2 of those layers are fiberglass. So it'll give me 20 versus 24, and that should help reduce my weight and really optimize making it as light as possible, and shouldn't really compromise the strength. So, what did I learn from all these samples and all this experimentation? I actually learned quite a bit. I spent just a little bit of money on some materials and just used some resin that I already had laying around, and it really helped my understanding of the different type of materials, different types of epoxies, and how that affects the properties. And again, one of my priorities is after strength, then there's lightness, and then there's cost. Well, when you look at the difference between these 2 types of materials, S-glass is about twice as expensive as regular fiberglass. And I didn't really see much of a difference. So for that, just the fact that it is so expensive by comparison, I just don't have a use for it. Then the next material up was, of course, carbon fiber. And carbon fiber is about 6 times the cost of regular fiberglass, but it really is stronger. You see it right away when you use it, particularly with epoxy resin, and that does seem to be worthwhile, particularly since there is a secondary market for carbon fiber. There are many sources out there where you can buy what's called second quality carbon fiber. And that's generally just carbon fiber that has some cosmetic problems with it. As you know, a lot of people use carbon fiber to coat parts and just to make them look pretty, get that carbon fiber look. And if there's a defect in it where they just can't use it for that carbon fiber look, it goes on to the secondary carbon fiber market. And that is not quite half, but almost half off. So that makes carbon fiber, second quality carbon fiber for structural use, about 3 to 1 in terms of cost. And considering how strong carbon fiber is, that is worth the money. So bottom line, on my cloth, I have landed on carbon fiber for the shell, and then just regular fiberglass for the laminate underneath to give it some strength and some depth. Along with ribs, 1/4 inch height, thickness, I should say, thickness. In there, because that made a huge difference. And that is the layup.